One surprising example of this is in mathematics. The word assumption means in the mathematical sciences, when you're doing research in mathematics, the word assumption means the givens that we are taking in order to be able to prove a particular theorem or work out a particular mathematical equation or speak in particular terms with respect to a particular mathematical concept. When we are talking about assumption in the English language, we say don't make particular assumptions. An assumption carries in the lay setting carries a negative connotation. An assumption means you have taken on a belief even though it is not really justified. Without real proof, you are making an assumption. Whereas in mathematics, it's a very neutral term. An assumption is what allows a mathematical experiment to actually exist. It's a necessary condition. To make assumptions, to take on assumptions, to state assumptions is a necessity for any kind of experiment. Mathematical and also in the natural sciences quite often. But mathematics it's particularly noteworthy. So that understanding that the word that you have been using in your field in a particular kind of way means something very different to a lay reader is very important to when you're writing, and to an editor in particular, because they need to be certain that a wider audience is going to understand what it is you're saying. So they may require, for example, footnotes, or they may require particular explanations of words that you are taking for granted. And you need to simply develop a sense for that, but also what helps at this particular juncture, this kind of nuance, understanding this kind of nuance, is having other people read your work, and not just people who are your supervisor or within your field, but also friends, family, people who you think are good writers. Also what works, and I'll talk about later as well, is collaboration, writing groups, writing together, giving each other feedback, reading each other's work and giving each other feedback, especially across disciplines, across fields of research, across even almost across languages. So even getting someone who isn't as familiar with the language that you're writing in, having them read your work gives you a different level of clarity with respect to use of vocabulary and jargon in particular. The other thing that I want to talk about when we're talking about formality is tone. That is number 4 on your list on the flashcards. Tone is the next thing that an editor is concerned about. One is the formal-informal tone. Whether your tone is formal enough to qualify as academic writing, or whether you're being too informal. One easy example of that, for example, is you don't use contractions. You don't say I can't. You say I cannot in an academic text. Contractions simply don't make it. Didn't, mustn't, don't make it to an academic text. It's always must not, cannot, did not. That's an easy one. Other types of tonal arrangements, tonal adjustments that you might want to make, once again, is you will get it from reading a lot of academic text. You will develop mostly. You probably already have almost certainly already have quite a fine sense of the tone of a piece, whether it's formal enough or informal enough. But the other aspect of tone that I actually want to talk about in much greater detail is whether tone is speculative or certain. And when we're talking about speculative or certain tone, what I want to refer to and emphasize is that degrees of certainty are expressed through modal verbs. Can, must, might, should, shall, will, would. Those are the words that determine how certain you are about what it is you're talking about. And academic certainty is requires the maintenance of a very fine balance, right? We want to appear extremely certain because we want to appear extremely authoritative and like we know what we're talking about, and our data is accurate and our understanding of those data is comprehensive. But at the same time, we also want to leave room both for academic and therefore objective appreciations of how uncertain knowledge in general is, and what a shorthand for talking about that is also just academic courtesy. We want to also leave room for saying that this is my understanding, this is my analysis, this is how I'm presenting these data, and this is my evaluation of these data. Other people may have other ways of presenting the data, they may have other interpretations of the data. So there does need to be a degree of flexibility that we express when we are talking about any academic concepts, any analysis, any interpretation, any evaluation. Modal verbs is another one of those things that in this session, we're not going to have time to go over them in detail, but I wanted to mention them so that you can look them up yourself. When do you want to use can? When do you want to use may? When do you want to use must? When do you want to use might? The one thing that I do want to note, which may not always become immediately clear, if you look up any kind of website on modal verbs, they'll list the modal verbs and they'll tell you what uses each verb has, and it's easy to kind of pick that up. But what's harder to get down, especially given the fact that in Indian English we overuse the word would a great deal. We very often hear I would attend class, I would attend this lecture, when we actually mean I will attend this lecture, or I would like to attend this lecture. So one shorthand for getting the word would especially right is to remember that it's an analog for could and should as well. This is the rule that one should generally abide by. Could, should, and would are conditionals. Generally, you will use could, should, and would only when there is an if in that sentence. I would go to this lecture if it looked interesting. I will go to this lecture tomorrow morning. So just that is a point that I wanted to make. It's a very specific grammatical point, and a lot of you are probably extremely familiar with it, and but nevertheless, it behooved me to specify that because it is something that comes up over and over again. After tone, what I want to look at is structure. Here we go. When we're talking about structure, we're talking not only about the structure of your thesis or your article or your essay as a whole, introduction, body, conclusion, and the logic of your arguments, one particular argument following from the next, and after that, how do you that you state your assumptions first, then you analyze those assumptions, then you complicate the situation and then you arrive at a conclusion. That kind of structure, that's not just that structure but also sentence structure, is also something that you need to pay attention to. Basically, when we're thinking about structure, when we're thinking about structure within our manuscript, what we're looking at is structure from sentence to paragraph to the entire piece itself. The structure of sentences is syntax. The structure of paragraphs within paragraphs is basically a microcosm of your entire write-up. And the structure of paragraph after paragraph, and then the logical, the way in which the entire writing hangs together is referred to as cohesiveness. Cohesiveness is how things glue together, and the way in which things glue together, the sort of conceptualization that one needs to arrive at is that things will glue together if they're coherent. And coherence means essentially logical reasoning. Every sentence that should follow from the earlier one. There should be some kind of connection between sentences, and then there should be some kind of connection between paragraphs, and there should be connection between sections following from each other. They can't be randomly placed where they are. The same thing actually applies to, if you think about it in terms of sentence, paragraph, and the entire write-up, then you are able to see how cohesiveness and coherence is actually a part of language use. So it's part of every aspect of what it is you're writing, and it's part of your writing no matter what the scale it is that you're looking at, what the scale of the thing that you're looking at is. Number 6, research as conversation. This is the title of a book which is freely downloadable from the website, which is called libgen.is. It's by Kathy Birkenstein and one other author. It's called Research as Conversation. It's a really invaluable resource to have. Here it is. Research as Conversation. The is my addition. So the title of the book is actually Research as Conversation. What we're looking at when we're talking about, so that's part 6 of what I'm talking about when we're looking at producing a manuscript through an editor's lens. We have to remember that research is not a monologue. It's not, as this is, for example, very unfortunately, me talking and not actually getting any feedback from you. That's not what research is, which is why this is actually a much less effective lecture, let's be honest, than it would be in a classroom, because we would be discussing each aspect of this. I would be asking you what your experience with conjunctions or with transitions has been, whether you are aware of the academic collocations in your field, and we would be getting all kinds of input from across the classroom. That's how research happens. That's how knowledge gets built. That's how knowledge construction happens. Research has to be a conversation. Even when you're doing your writing, it can't be a monologue. How do you manage that? How do you manage to make research conversation rather than a monologue? A few hints, a few suggestions from me are: say something new everywhere. And this is a suggestion which isn't actually a suggestion. In order to be producing original research and for your research to qualify as original research, you do need to be saying something new all the time. One mistake that either beginning writers or writers who don't think very much about their researchers and writers who don't think very much about the communicative effectiveness of their writing make is that they very often simply paraphrase, summarize other people's research and leave it at that. It's like when you're doing a literature review or when you're establishing your credentials as a researcher, you simply list, okay, this particular book talks about this particular researcher talks about this particular field has evolved in this kind of way. All of that should have one more part to it, and that is, what is your analysis of this? It should never just be this particular author says this particular thing. The question you have to always answer immediately after that is, so what? Why are you telling me this? What do you understand by it? What do you think of it? That always has to be part of any kind of material that you're presenting to your reader. Speaking of your reader, talk to the reader and not at the reader. How do you do that? There's no formula for it. But the single most important thing that one needs to be aware of when one wishes to talk to rather than talk at one's reader is to be aware of the audience. Whom is it that you're writing to? Whom is it that you're writing for? Who's going to read your writing? Know your audience. Referring back to the previous point, what do you think of it? How to make research conversation? What do you think of X, Y, and Z? The two aspects of it, of why are you telling your reader, why am I insisting that you must always be telling your reader what you think of a particular thing, how you process it, how you're analyzing it, how you're positioning it, how it's fitting into the context that you're defining. The reason that I'm emphasizing that is because it does two things. One is it offers the reader a view into your own self-reflection. How are you positioning your research? How are you defining the frame of your research? And how aware are you of the limitations of your own thought? That comes through when you are constantly evaluating and analyzing whatever it is that you're presenting to the reader. The second thing that it does, and which is much more direct, is offer a critique of whatever it is you're presenting. And the offering of critique is precisely, as I said before, what establishes your authority as a researcher. So, but at the same time, it also enters you into conversation with whatever it is that you're critiquing. Critique is not criticism. It's not you criticizing whatever writer or whatever work you're presenting. It is, how do you understand it? How important do you think it is? How impactful do you think it has been? Why do you think it has been that impactful? In what kinds of ways is it impactful? How is research going to progress, or has it progressed because of the impact of whatever it is you're presenting? Part of this, the thing that you need to remember and work on very, 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 very actively is integrating quotations. Not merely putting things in quotation marks, X, Y, and Z, author says, quotation marks, X, Y, and Z, end quote. But integrating quotations into your text. This strategy is also something that's discussed very widely across websites on research writing, books on academic writing. How do you integrate quotations into your text? Not just X, Y, and Z author says and quotation, but as X, Y, and Z author explains and then paraphrasing what they have said, putting it into your own words, in the next sentence, for which you will still need to cite it. Paraphrases do require citation. Please do remember that. But it is put into your own words, which allows the reader a view not only into the information that you're presenting, but also into how you are processing it. And that's, after all, everything. And let's talk about evidence. Citation is evidence. Why are we talking about evidence? When we are saying talk to people and not at people, one of the things that we're prioritizing is respecting the reader. We are not simply making bald statements. We are constantly presenting the reader with proof for what it is we are claiming. And that is key in academic writing. Any editor worth their salt will be very, very acutely aware of where your writing is slipping into opinion rather than justified opinion. That too is part of this card that I've presented over here. Fact, opinion, belief. Those are the three kinds of knowing that we need to very clearly distinguish in our own minds. What aspect of what it is we know is fact and backed up by plentiful evidence and common knowledge and shared knowledge? What part of it is an opinion, our analysis, our interpretation? And what part of it is a belief we hold? For example, a hypothesis is a belief you hold. You have this gut feeling. You can't really cite evidence for it yet. You may have justifications for your belief, but they don't constitute evidence of any kind. Opinion is actually backed up by evidence, but that evidence is interpreted. And therefore, there can be other interpretations of that evidence, and therefore other people's opinion can be as valid as yours. Fact is backed by evidence that is not being interpreted. A particular color is red because everyone agrees that it is red. There are no two opinions on that, unless it's a very dark pink or very dark orange, and then it becomes a question of opinion. Two kinds of citation that you need to be aware of. In-text citations and bibliographic citations. In-text citations are citations that appear within the body of your own writing. Bibliographic citations are those that appear in footnotes, in endnotes, in references, in bibliographies. So that's the name of the author, the title of the book and chapter, and all the details, the publication details. In-text citations typically have far fewer details. Whatever citation style you're using must be consistent. You must be consistent in the citation style that you use. And I have another note card for you that goes over that, the citation styles. Common citation styles include the MLA, the APA, the Chicago, the Harvard, and the IEE. Sometimes citation styles are in-house, which are specific to a particular publisher. You must know which citation style you are following. I hear surprisingly often when I'm talking to researchers that they're going to use whatever citation style, and they'll just use whatever is used in the journal that they're going to publish in. It's not enough to vaguely know what your citation style is, despite the fact that you might have very, very good software which is going to put all your bibliographies and all your citations in a particular format for you. You need to be able to do it yourself, because you need to know those details. And you can't know those details until they are systematized in your own mind by having put them in those particular formats. You will not know those details. And when you don't know who has published something, when it was published, how far into a book a particular thing is, you forget what the significance of that thing is. The thing that you're citing, its significance is, you remember its significance, and it grows in your mind, it evolves in your mind because of your accurate placement of it. And your accurate placement of it is in fact really supported by having used particular citation styles in order to formulate its significance to yourself. So citation styles are not negotiable, they're not dispensable. Please know your citation style, please follow it consistently, and from an editor's point of view, consistency of citation is as basic as grammar. So an inconsistent and badly cited text can never pass muster for an editor. It will simply be sent back to you for citation. So it's absolutely essential. In sum, to wrap up the technical part of this session, the thing that you need to remember at the end of the day is, there are three things that you need to remember really at the end of the day. The first is revise, rewrite as much as possible, rewrite everything that you write over and over again till you are able to understand the many contours of what it is you're saying. That is how you get it, editorially speaking, fit for publication. Part of revising is proofreading. Proofreading is best carried out in collaborative fashion. You can never ever proofread your work 100%. Somebody else has to proofread it for you, and instead of using a paid proofreader, it is a much better idea to collaborate with someone so that they proofread your work and you proofread their work, because you will also bounce ideas off of each other. Across disciplines, across fields is always a plus, an added bonus. Apart from collaborating, your mentoring, your mentor is always a great person to proofread your work if they will do it for you. The other option is to offer mentorship to other people and to seek mentorship in a variety of different kinds of places, and practice mentorship, because as we all know, teaching is the best way to learn, and the best way to understand one's own research better is always to be teaching it. So offering mentorship to others in your field is one of the best ways that you can improve your writing from an editorial perspective. Number 2, you have to absolutely keep on reading. And last but not least, write right now. We can, one of the mistakes that we very often make as beginning researchers is we think that we're going to start writing once we are better informed, once we know our field better. This is a serious mistake. We have to be writing out whatever it is that we're reading and whatever it is that we're thinking about what we're reading from day one, from the time we decide to undertake research. That's when we need to start writing. Because a lot of the ideas that we have in the beginning will end up being far more effective than the ideas that we have as our knowledge increases, because our knowledge increases in bits and pieces. So when it increases in this bit and in this bit, our inherent intuitive knowledge, which led us to a particular kind of conceptualization, is gone. So we have actually adopted some kind of incomplete knowledge structure rather than our own much more comprehensive knowledge structure. So you have to write this stuff down so that when you write this, the next step in which you're gaining coherence again and gaining a comprehensive understanding of the concept again, you will be able to use the first part. That's first. Second, the evolution of your own writing is one of the best learning mechanisms that you have even later on. For every successive project, seeing how your ideas and your writing developed in the previous project is going to be key to evolving, to developing further. So you have to write right now. You have to be writing right now, every single day, as often as possible, in bits and pieces, randomly, in a variety of different kinds of ways. And one of the resources that I have for you in order to do this is an app called ginkgowriter.com. app.ginkgowriter.com. The reason that it's very useful is because it's note cards. It's digital, but note cards which you can move around, which you can structure in a variety of different ways, which also has one kind of flow, and then it has a horizontal flow, it also has a vertical flow. You can expand in a variety of different kinds of ways. It's a really good resource, and do please explore it, because you might find it incredibly useful, especially to do bits of writing, which you can then later on move around. Okay.